Welcome into Pretty Over 50. I'm Kimberly. I'm so glad you're here. Today I'm here with Penny Kelly. You might remember I had a discussion with her a few weeks ago, and she's back to answer questions because you guys had so very many questions. So welcome in, Penny. It's so nice to have you back.
It is good to be here. I love some of the questions. So let's go for it.
Well, we had so many questions and I just sort of glommed them in together to try to, answer as many as possible. For those of you who didn't see the interview I did with Penny Kelly, it was based on the book that I've been using for my detox program. You guys have been so interested in that. This is the book, Getting Well Naturally from the Soil to the Stomach. And the reason I'm so crazy about this book is that it lays out an entire detox program that's very, very effective, easy to do, step by step, easy to follow. And most of you know, I just finished the first go round of the detox program. It took me about 4 months and I wanted to do it slowly. It'll be quicker, the next time that I do that. So a lot of you have purchased the book. A lot of you are very interested in it and wanted to find out more. That's what we're going to be doing today. So Penny's going to be answering our questions, and I took all your questions and kind of glommed them up, and we'll try to get as much information as possible from Penny.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
The first question I want to talk about is a broader concept, and you mentioned it a little bit in our last discussion, and that was, can you talk more about the concept of 5 generations from the soil and what happens to us as humans the further away we get from the soil or the more generations away from the soil?
Yeah, that's really an important understanding. So I actually sat down yesterday and thought, okay, let me capsulize those stages, because what happens with each generation that moves away from the soil ends up a little more degenerated. And so I wrote it down because there's a lot. And this is a very small capsulization of what's actually in the book. So when Weston Price was doing his original research into what the heck is going on with people, that they're losing their teeth by the time they're 20, they're dying of tuberculosis, they're dying of this, that, and whatever, they're coming up with birth defects. We've got this problem with criminality and depression that we never had before. What's going on? So he's the guy who then took a team of about 30 doctors, dentists, nurses, photographers, stenographers, and traveled the world for the next 15 years. And every year they went someplace where they could work with and study a group of people who had not been introduced to the Western white man's diet, which is basically sugar, alcohol, canned goods, and processed foods. So what they found was this extraordinary health, that was where people didn't get sick, period. They had no idea what arthritis or cancer was. And so this was all this was happening in, I think, early 1900s, 1919, 1920, somewhere in there. So he lays out what he experienced in those places where people had been introduced to the Western white man's diet. And then he contrasted that with people who were still on native or indigenous diets. And so I took that information and put it together with my observations, which go on for another 100 years, because I wasn't here in 1919. And this is what I came up with. So the first generation, if you're raised on an indigenous diet and you have one child, then you switch diets to the Western white man's diet and you have a second child. The difference in those two children, and he had lots of photos in his book, it is stunning. And what he saw was that in that second generation, the whole bone structure looked like it was pinched, like everything was long and stringy. If you use a plant as an example, and you think about what happens when you put a plant in the house and try to grow it without sunlight, it gets long and stringy, and the leaves are way far apart, and the stem goes on forever, and that stem is a weak point. And so what he discovered was that people got really long and skinny and sort of stretched out. Lungs were too deep to breathe into the bottom of them, produced asthma. That takes a couple of generations. But I'm just going to read through the first generation away from the soil. You get cavities, you get a loss of teeth. They literally fall out by the dozens. Maybe have 3 or 4 teeth left. What he saw was children born with club foot. One leg just twisted, didn't grow correctly. Children who were susceptible to colds, adults susceptible to flu, and then childhood diseases like chickenpox, measles. Those were everywhere. And that was people who were extremely healthy. They didn't have any birth defects, and they didn't have any colds. Children would go outside and play out barefoot in 30-degree weather with maybe a light sweater on at the most, and play in the water in the mountain streams and come in and be just as comfortable inside as they were outside. So big difference there in terms of their immune system function. That's called high immunity, when you can be warm just all by yourself outside in cold weather. And they didn't get chickenpox, they didn't get measles, that kind of thing. Another thing he saw was fatigue. The old one, not the old ones, but anybody on the diet had this real low level, subtle level of fatigue, and their eyesight would worsen slightly. And what that gave rise to was this whole layer of doctors and dentists and psychiatrists and chemical pills and potions. So that was the start of the medical system. And most of the doctors were based on herbal kinds of things and natural medicine. And dentists were basically almost non-existent. There were a few, but they were more scientists than they were actual needing to fiddle with teeth. So then, second generation, what he discovered was the children of people who had been raised on Western white man diet, sugar, canned foods, jams, jellies, canned vegetables, all that stuff. People began dying from the flu and measles. They would show up with blindness. They would, especially if they got measles, they would be unable to fight the measles, and they would end up blind or deaf, or sometimes both. So they would show up with a cleft palate. There was such a shortage of nutritional building materials that the body couldn't even close the jaw so that the individual would be able to chew normally and breathe normally. There was deep fatigue in people. There was also a decrease in IQ and creativity. All of a sudden, people were settling for other people's ideas. There was depression and alcoholism that he said was off the charts. And I look at what we have now and go, you haven't seen off the charts yet. And in 50-year-olds and those who are older, heart disease, arthritis, diabetes began to show up. Eyesight would worsen. Almost everybody over 50, if they survived that long, was having to wear glasses. And that people were gravitating away from indigenous villages and into the cities to take jobs because they thought it was easier. They thought they didn't have the energy level to how do I say it, to live a sustainable lifestyle, to be sustainable in their own right. So that gave rise to, and so they inherited all the stuff that the first generation had, plus these, much greater susceptibility to flu, measles, heart disease, arthritis. And that then gave rise to optometrists, because now everybody needed glasses. Ta-da-ta-da. Podiatrists, pharmaceutical agency or pharmaceutical companies began to form out of what was originally pill companies and potion companies and people peddling pills and potions. Now we have big pharmaceuticals taking shape, and the first signs of chemical agriculture starting. Well, everybody's moved to the city. We don't have enough kids left to work the farm. Yeah, this chemical makes it really easy. We don't have to haul manure and do all the work that we used to do to restore the soil. We'll just spray it. Oh, terrible, terrible decision. So that's second generation away from the soil. And then came the third, and the third generation, all of a sudden we had allergies and asthma appearing, ADHD and ADD children, special needs children who were just out and out retarded. 12-year-olds needed glasses. You didn't have to go to 50 to need glasses. Now you only, 12-year-olds. People couldn't finish building out the body as a reproducing adult without sacrificing something. And so eyesight was one of the first things to go. So now 12-year-olds need glasses. There was a further decrease in IQ. There was absolutely blatant animal fertility problems. Animals were being born with legs that didn't work, cleft palate, they couldn't suck, all kinds of stuff. It was like, oh my, what's going on here? Thyroid and adrenal functions began to appear. There were people all of a sudden would die in childbirth. The body wasn't wide enough to deliver the child. So cesarean birth got going in that third generation. And now instead of cancer in 50-year-olds and up, we have cancer in 30 and 40-year-olds. And that third generation gave rise to hospitals, nursing homes, remedial education, toothpaste, toothbrush, and mouthwash industries. Toothbrushes and toothpaste were not common when I was a kid. I think I was probably 8 or 9 years old in the third grade when all of a sudden there was a campaign from the state to disperse toothbrushes to everybody. So orthodontists, all of a sudden, what are we going to do? All these teeth are crooked. They're growing on top of one another. They're in every direction. And that orthodontist, the jaw was not able to build out with its full size. And so the teeth didn't have as much room. And then social services started up. All of a sudden there's a detention center and a jail in every town. That wasn't the case before. We didn't have juvenile delinquents and angry kids. Medical insurance showed up and pharmaceuticals got bigger. That's all in the third generation. Then we had the fourth generation, which is characterized by everything from generation 1, 2, and 3. But now on top of that, we have premature infants, low birth weights, digestive difficulties. People all of a sudden can't digest this and that upsets their stomach and they're getting ulcers. The stomach is not able to rebuild itself with all the crap that people put in it. There are 2-year-olds with cancer, 6-year-olds with arthritis, 8-year-olds with diabetes, morbidly obese 10-year-olds, and continuous ear, nose, and throat infections among all of those. Children really have taken a hit because of poor nutrition. So then we had chronic fatigue showing up, killer allergies and asthma. In fact, my mother-in-law died of an asthma attack, and the attitude before that was, no, asthma doesn't kill, it's just inconvenient. And when they did the autopsy on her, her breathing passages, her lung passages were shut and glued together. Just boom. She just, took her very early. We have learning and emotionally disabled children. Learning disability and emotional disability is a chemical shortage or chemical dysfunction in the body. You cannot produce the chemical to have the emotion if you don't have the frequencies and the nutrition to produce those. You have to have the nutrition. And learning, perception, all of that is about the ability to maintain frequencies in the body mind system. And if you don't have a frequency, you don't have a perception. You can't see it. So then we have 14-year-olds with heart attacks, PMS showing up everywhere, urinary tract infections, loss of hair in both men and women, depression that led or leads to suicide, anorexia, bulimia, irritable bowels, irritable stomachs, and irritable people. And all of that gave rise to cardiology specialists, ear, nose, and throat specialists, internists, oncologists for the cancers, weight loss centers, support groups for everything, psychologists, endocrinologists, neonatal units and specialists, neonatal specialists, special walkers, beds, chairs, bathtubs, industries to support all of those, and the expansion of all of the above professions. So that's the 4th generation away from the soil, and we're now in the 5th and the 6th. So what you get with 5th generation is an inability to produce or reproduce, serious bone and nervous system defects, autism, diabetes, heart disease, and cancers are rampant across the entire population. Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, all common, almost expected, and a worsening of everything listed above. And what we have ended up with is the entire economy is running on the backs of poor health. If we all got healthy, probably 2/3 of us would be out of a job. No income. So we're stuck. We've painted ourselves into a corner. We don't have the nutrition. And if we get healthy, are we going to have the work? Are we, what has to happen here? So, and when you get the rise of a medical economy that runs the world, then you get what we're seeing out there now, which is something that is tragic. So, we're in between a rock and a hard place. Yeah. And that's, it's like,
Yeah, that was such a good rundown of really what's happened over the last 5 generations. Tell me again the name of the book and the author that originally did this study in case some of the viewers would like to go learn more.
Okay, yeah, that was Dr. Weston Price. The name of the book was Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And I read his 50th anniversary edition. It's a little tiny print, jammed pages. When I first opened it, I thought, this is going to be a piece of work trying to get through this. But once I started reading, I could not put it down. It was absolutely mind-blowing. So many things that he outlines and makes clear in that book. The amount of nutrition that Indigenous peoples were getting was anywhere from 10 to 50 times more than what we're getting, or more. That was the absolute minimum. They were getting nutrients that we had never even heard of. And they were eating things that our popular press was saying, oh no, don't eat that because that causes this, and don't eat that because it causes that. Well, all of that advice from government about what we should be eating was absolutely the opposite of what we needed. 100% of the opposite.
Mhm.
And so we had people avoiding fats and all of that for 30, 40 years. And you need fats or you're going to have Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's and all that. The brain is 65% fat. Soy-based nutrition for children in formulas, the brain doesn't even build out correctly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we really have had kind of a bad set of advisors coming
Mhm.
from the government.
Yeah.
They should really stick to government and leave the nutrition and medical stuff alone because they
Yeah.
really don't know.
Well, we certainly have a lot of changes to implement if we want to turn
Yeah.
things around. Why is there so little nutrition in the food we get today?
So in the old days, the rule, kind of an unwritten rule, was that the farm was a completely self-sufficient unit. Nothing in, nothing out. Okay. So when you had a few cows and a few pigs and a few chickens and a small orchard and a small garden and some kids and maybe a sheep or a goat or two to keep the brush down, all of that kind of stuff, you had a certain kind of soil that you kept renewing by taking all of the cuttings from your orchard, all of the grass from your yard, all of the manure from your animals, and you just kept putting that back into your soil system. Now we don't do that. We don't do that. We plant, the plants uptake minerals. After a few years, the minerals are gone. And so that's why we don't have any nutrition. There's no minerals in the food. Without the minerals, you can't get the vitamin transactions that are required. And then we have dead soil. They spray and they kill all the critters in the soil. There are millions of little tiny microorganisms and bugs and worms and beetles and mycorrhiza and all kinds of stuff in the soil. And that's all really, really necessary. And we don't pay attention to that. And so a lot of soil then collapses. And then when it rains, because the soil is so packed, the water all runs off and it takes half the topsoil with it. Well, you know, that is the reason why we, you know, no minerals and all kinds of sprays sprayed. You know, when you have a really serious pesticide or herbicide or whatever, those are incredibly volatile. They're dangerously volatile. And so you put heavy metals in those to keep them stable enough to last long enough for you to get them on the field. Well, when you spray that stuff, yeah, you'll get an effect on the weeds or the bugs, but what you get is a residue of heavy metals that are really, really toxic. And a lot of those chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, they stay in the soil for 15, 20 years. So if you're an organic farmer, then you say, okay, I'm not going to spray anymore. You know, well, what about the 20 years it takes to undo all of the, you know, the chemicals? And then what about the heavy metals? Plants are going to pick up whatever's in the soil. They're going to use what's available.
You know, it's remarkable to me when we really start looking at our food system, our food supply. I know when I was younger, I would lay on the grass and look at all the fluffy clouds in the sky.
Yeah.
Now I look up in the sky and it's chemtrails.
I know.
The sky looks completely different than when I was a youngster.
Yeah.
And when I think, okay, well, what are in those chemtrails? What's in the water? What's in the food? Here's a box of packaged food that they're calling healthy.
I know.
And I just think it's remarkable to me that we can even get up out of bed in the morning, that we can even live. we must be such miraculous creatures.
We are.
We can exist in an environment that is toxic in every way we turn.
Right. That is true.
How, here's one of the questions that I had that so many asked. Why should we do a detox? And then people would say, I'm afraid. I'm afraid I'm not going to do it right, or I'm just afraid.
No.
So can you kind of talk about,
Yeah.
when you start really paying attention to all the chemicals and the toxins around us, it seems overwhelming. Detox is something we can do to start the process of healing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Okay. So if you never detox, the inside of your body is the equivalent of your kitchen. If you never did the dishes, scrubbed the floor, repainted, updated, nothing. You just kept on accumulating garbage and waste and dirty dishes, and trash in the wastebasket is overflowing, and you've kind of compacted it on the floor and you're walking over it. You don't even notice it anymore. That's what the inside of the body begins to struggle with. And when that gets to that point, which is usually around 50 to 55 years of age, things start to really show up very quickly. Problems everywhere. So detox is equivalent to cleaning your kitchen and your house and doing your laundry. When you do detox, if you can think of it this way, you can't really do it wrong. You're going to do it so that it'll be more or less effective, okay? But it's not going to hurt you if you do it wrong. The only thing that I would say you have to be really careful of is doing the colon sweep and then skipping the yogurt or the probiotics at the end. You need those. You need those. You need those. I did that once. It was a terrible mistake. What happened was this bad bacteria in the gut took over. It got so bad that I couldn't eat. I bloated with everything. I had systemic candida. And then I ended up having to take drugs. And it was really rough, and changed my diet. And yes, I finally, after 6 months, almost a year, was like, okay, I think I'm better. But when, that's the only mistake you can make in terms of the detox procedures. So if you start, you can start with any of them. The liver flush cleans out your veins and your kidneys and your pancreas and your liver. Any kind of stony material clears a lot of plaque in your arteries because it dissolves stony material. And then the liver collects that. And then on the last day of the flush, you dump it all. So that's, however effective it is, it's helpful. Okay. Yeah. Can't do it wrong.
I was talking to my daughter about my detox, and I said, yeah, honey, it feels like my insides have been power washed.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like going to the car wash,
I know.
Yeah, I can't wait to do it again, because my body feels so different and looks so different.
Yeah.
From this first go round. I'm really looking forward to seeing what it's going to be like a year from now. I'm excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It made a huge difference in my life. Mm-hmm. And I had some of those same reactions, kind of watching yourself get better, feel better, look better. And there's an inner spring of energy that comes on board or starts, jumping up and down. That's the best I could describe it.
Yeah, feeling like we should have been feeling the whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's jump into some of the issues that we seem to come across as we grow older. And I was talking to a PhD in nutrition yesterday, and we were both kind of stunned and shocked that it has become almost expected that as we grow older, we're going to get arthritis, we're going to get cancer. It's now like we're going to get it. It's not if you get it. Everybody's expecting that. So a lot of people ask questions about arthritis, osteoporosis, and joint pain. Can you talk a little bit about what those conditions are and how we maybe be able to address them in a more healthful way?
Yeah, those are the result, all of them, across the board, no exceptions, and maybe a few other things besides. They are the result of inflammation that has spread throughout the body and even into the joint capsules and all of the articulations within the body, places where bones come together. So, inflammation becomes rampant. Usually that's because the things you're eating are so irritating to the body. That's probably the number one thing. There's a measurement in your blood test. If you have a full chemical scan, it's called, that measures 25 or 30 things going on in the body. And one of those is called your CRP. It stands for C-reactive protein. And that is a measurement of how much inflammation you have. And that should be down about 1 or 2, maybe. When I went to see Dr. Gonzalez the first time, and he had samples of my blood and my hair, he looked at me and he said, "I don't know why you don't have cancer. Your CRP is, I think it was 19. And I was like, "Oh, what does that mean?" No clue. And he said, "That means that you are so acid that nothing is happening in the body. You put food in, nothing changes. That means that your cell walls are as hard as rocks and there's nothing going in or coming out." And I was like, "Oh." And it's a combination of things that I had to change. The first thing is he said, "You need to have way more water. How much water are you drinking?" I said, "Well, I have 2 cups of tea a day." He said, "No, you have to drop the tea altogether. That's you've developed a major allergic reaction to tea. And every cup of tea irritates the joints 10 times worse." And I was like, "Oh, no, I think I'm going to die without tea." But I didn't. So, I had to start drinking 6 to 8 glasses of water a day. And then I had to deal with my irritation because I was running to the bathroom all the time. And so it took a while for my bladder to adjust to holding a bigger load. And then I had to do more exercise. You have to have exercise because it generates electricity, which then drives the transactions. And when you exercise, you breathe heavily. And when you breathe heavily, you alkalinize yourself a little bit. And to become alkaline means that your tissues soften and open and become permeable. And when you acidify, it means that you harden, you become sclerotic, and your tissues close up and nothing gets in and out. So you need to be, if you're too alkaline, stuff washes into the cell and washes right out before it can do anything. But that's that main set of things that I had to start doing immediately. I cannot say how there's no way I could give tribute to water or to the elimination of the irritating foods that I was highly allergic to: tea, potatoes, tomatoes, green peppers, eggplant. Those are not part of my diet at all now. I had to start taking supplements in order to supply nutrition. Collagen was a major thing. I still take collagen, and that helps your skin as well, and your hair, as well as your joints. You have to have collagen. Another thing is sulfur. You need nutritional sulfur, and that's MSM, methyl sulfonyl methane. Sulfonyl is the sulfur part, and it's in a nutritional form, a form that's easily absorbable. So, that's really necessary. Let's see, there's a couple of things I wrote down. Hang on. Okay, so here's the list I wrote. This is why people get arthritis. Inflammation is rampant, not enough water intake, allergies to food, heavy metals present, I had a lot of heavy metals, way over the limit for half a dozen. So mercury included. Not doing any detox, never doing detox. The junk piles up, and then it gets in places it shouldn't be, and then you hurt. Not enough collagen, not enough sulfur. All food is cooked. People feel that they haven't eaten a meal if they're not eating something cooked. But once you cook it, it has 0 enzymes in it. Enzymes help you digest and absorb food. So when you kill all your enzymes every single meal, and then you eat that, you put a huge load on your pancreas. And pretty soon the pancreas exhausts itself and stops producing enzymes. And then you have these little enzyme producing areas in the small intestine. Those get wiped out because you never do any detox. So there's no hydrochloric acid in the stomach. You have to have hydrochloric acid. You only need maybe a teaspoon, half teaspoon of HCl in the stomach, but without that, your food doesn't get broken down appropriately. Like I said, low functioning pancreas because it's exhausted. People often have parasites, are loaded with parasites. When they told me I had parasites, I was like, I do not. So I was highly insulted, but I did. And then often the last straw for the body is chronic low-grade viral infections. Things like herpes simplex, you get cold sores. Bartonella, which is a virus picked up from cats. There's all kinds of little chronic viruses. What is that one we used to talk about in high school, 9th grade? We call it the kissing disease. You pass this virus from one to the next, and then you'd have a month where you just felt like crap. So those low grade viruses they have to be dealt with. And there are low-grade bacterial infections, not just viral infections. So recently I was experimenting with my frequency generator, thinking, well, they're now saying that Alzheimer's, Parkinson's are the result of C. diff, which is, oh my God, I can't think of the name. It's difficile, Clostridium difficile. And so I thought, let me just see if I have any of that. And sure enough, it took me down. But I was really glad that I went exploring with that because I don't need that. I don't need that in my system. And C. diff has become chronic in people. And it's low grade. And it causes ringing in the ears and all kinds of tinnitus, they call it. And you'll see people say, oh, put this in your ear. But no, you have to get rid of the bacteria. What you're hearing is your own brain struggling with its electrical signaling because there's a bacteria involved. And that bacteria crosses the blood-brain barrier and gets in there and then prevents repair and rebuilding. And so tinnitus is an early sign often that you're headed downhill into one of the big elderly diseases, dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, things like that. Yeah. So those things, if you've got arthritis and you just address that, it really addresses almost everything else going on that you need to be doing differently.
What about age spots and liver spots, Penny? What are those? What's behind that?
Yeah, that's your liver is just absolutely overloaded. You have to do a coffee enema on a regular basis or a set of coffee enemas on a regular basis to keep that liver clear. Now, people hear the word enema and, they faint away. Which of course I did the same thing when Gonzalez first said you have to do the coffee enema. I was like,
definitely a skill that you have to work at. At least
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's something that you will faint when you first hear it, but after a year, you'll, say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to be busy. I'm going to do my coffee. I'm going to have coffee for an hour here. And that, when you put coffee inside the anal opening, the mucous membrane that is inside that anal opening is in direct communication with the liver. And why that is, we don't know, but it is. That's the way it works. And so when that coffee hits that mucous membrane, it causes the liver to dump toxins immediately. And that then, triggers the whole colon and small intestine to dump toxins, to just send them right on through. And that is really very, very helpful. There are also some, and I don't know enough about this, but this was something that Gonzalez talked about personally, that there were certain oils that people put on their skin, and not just oils, but suntan stuff, with a sun factor of 10 or 30 or 50. When you get, a factor of 50, you can taste that stuff within seconds after you put it on your skin. Don't use that stuff. So they put this oil on their skin and then they go out in the sun. And they're thinking, oh, I'm protected. Well, no, that oil is in the skin and the sun reacts with that. And the result is that you end up with spots all over the place. And that, and the other thing is that you have old sun damage from when you were young. The skin has literally been damaged, and then you didn't do the nutritional stuff that you needed to do to restore that skin. And so you get spots. There are some things that work to fade those spots. I would say they're well worth it. I've tried a few of them. I'm not very regular with them, but I tried them enough because it was like, let me see if this really works, that kind of attitude. So, and they do. Some of it, at least the ones that I tried to, and that's Gundry. Some of his products are very good.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a couple others that are also very good, but I can't think of the name. Dermal skincare is one.
Mhm.
Yeah, so if you want to do something for spots, put some kind of fader on it, and then take some kind of nutrient with collagen in it to rebuild the skin's layers.
Mhm.
And it doesn't take long. I think probably the best thing is getting enough sleep. That's major. You have to get sleep.
Yeah,
So
I'll tell you, I've gotten a little suspicious about the whole sunscreen thing myself the last,
yeah,
yeah.
I don't use it. I take extra beta carotene,
Mhm.
and I wear a light covering, and I try to get a little bit of sun on a regular basis because you need it for vitamin D. If you're covered with sunscreen, that vitamin D isn't happening.
Yeah.
You need your skin, you need to be exposed to the sun. You'll get enough sun, even with a hat on, a straw hat, there's going to be some light that comes through. That's enough. You don't need to be slathered with sunscreen, unless, I take that back, unless you've just recently had a chemical peel or you were burned. My sister was burned in a gasoline fire when she was 16. And then when she finally was able to get out of the hospital after 6 months, she was forbidden to go in the sun for 2 years at least. And even then it was very small exposure. So if you've had burns, yeah, you need to not be in the sun.
Mhm.
But yeah, otherwise you do need some sun, a lot of it, 2, 3, 4, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about cancer now, and the fact that cancer has become almost expected
I know.
in a way, and it's so disturbing to me. It used to, way back when we were teens or youngsters, cancer was rare. It is
It
now
was.
commonplace almost. Can we talk a little bit about what that is and
Yeah.
why it's become why it's everywhere?
In a nutshell, cancer is the end stage of several years of severe malnutrition. So you have to stop everything when you get cancer and start rebuilding at a faster rate than you are destroying yourself. So there's a couple of factors. There's poor diet. First of all, you're not getting what you need, or you're eating sugar, or some crap. The second thing is high stress. In a period of high stress, let's say your husband dies, or your wife, or your child, or something. You enter into this period of grieving and immense stress. And let's say if you've been married for 30, 40 years and your husband dies, you have to reorganize, rethink everything about your life, because now you're on your own. And maybe the house will have to, lots of stuff. Or you get into a job that is incredibly stressful. So those periods of stress, in periods of stress, the body stops absorbing nutrition. It just basically can't handle anything. And so it sends it right on through. And after about 1.5 years or 2 years of severe malnutrition caused by that stress or poor diet, and sometimes there's a couple other things, toxic chemicals. You'll pick up toxic chemicals in your fresh food, or you've got a load of heavy metals, or all the above. Poor diet, a high stress, toxic chemicals, and a big metal load. You're going to have to remove metal. You're going to have to relax yourself. You're going to have to detox the chemicals. You're going to have to change what you're eating. All of that has to happen, all of it. And if you don't, and in my book, and I forget what page it is, and I don't have a book right handy right here. It is on the bookshelf behind me, but there's a diagram in the book that shows the cycle of degeneration. Most people think of the cell as the basic unit of the body, and you're made of billions of cells. That's not the case. The cell is made of something called a somatid, SOMATID. And we've known about these somatids for 100 years, at least, maybe 150. But the somatid is this little living thing, and it appears to be almost indestructible. And when you're healthy and you're getting everything you need, that somatid is functioning perfectly, and it reproduces. When your nutrition drops, or your stress skyrockets, or now you take in some heavy metals, and those metals give off frequencies that interfere with the function of your normal cells. And so now you've got these metals that are interfering with your ability to absorb, or they're changing the nutritional frequencies of what you have eaten. So that then those things get into the cell and destroy the somatids, and the somatids begin to deteriorate. And the first 3 stages of deterioration are minor. It's like, okay, yeah, we see that that's a change, and that's a change, and maybe you don't feel as good, maybe you don't have as much energy, and maybe you have a little more fatigue, etc. But then it begins to deteriorate at a faster rate. And one of the first stages of degeneration of a somatid is a bacteria. And then after that is a virus. And then after that, there are spores. And then, there's several stages of spores. And then there is the final stage, which is cancer. When the system deliberately tries to destroy itself, because it's the same principle as plants and insects. Plants have they grow in the field, they have an energy field around them, they have an aura. And insects, of course, have, they have this antenna, and they fly around, and they are sensing, looking for plants that do not have a healthy harmonic energy system. And those are the plants that they go after. And the same thing happens in the human being. When your somatids become degenerated to the point that you get a cancer, now the system tries to take itself down from within because it considers you unfit for life, unfit to carry on, to reproduce, to make beauty and creativity and, joy and all those things. And that happens to be true. When you get crabby all the time, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. You should experience joy and at least a calmness and some pleasure. When you're healthy, you will experience those. When you're not, then you need to deal with that. So the somatid is this, all this whole stuff about, how do I say, bacteria and viruses, those are coming from inside of you. Those don't come from outside. They are your own products. And they, your particular somatids are going to produce viruses specific to you. So to say that they're coming from outside and we have to take this or that medicine, it's a nice placebo in many cases. A lot of times the frequency of the medicine will cancel the bacteria, but that doesn't do anything for the regeneration process. So we don't do very well in the long run.
I was watching one of your talks recently, and I believe it was one of your look-sees. And you had seen that a company, like a refrigerator company, was now making an appliance in your home that grew microgreens.
Yeah.
And that sparked me right there. I did research. I've been growing microgreens ever since.
Oh, very good.
Which is the easiest thing to do. I've been a gardener all my life. Growing microgreens is a piece of cake. It's so
I know.
easy. I now have microgreens in my diet almost daily, pretty much almost daily. In addition, I'm going to be planting, and I live in an apartment. I just have a little back patio. I'm going to be doing a container garden starting in the spring.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about little things like that we can do that will increase the nutritional content of our food?
Oh, wow. Well, you just covered the whole thing. That's it. Microgreens, that gets you your dark green stuff, your B vitamins, your, oh my gosh, there's so much in those leafy greens, B12, B17, all of the factors that you need to really be healthy. Those, I can't say enough about those. When I think I might have said this in the last time we talked, but it bears repeating. When you sprout a seed to create a microgreen or even a sprout, a microgreen is just a little bit bigger than a sprout. Okay. But you increase the level of nutrition available by 800 times.
Wow.
So that is a huge improvement. If you couldn't get any food, you could live on sprouts for quite a long time and microgreens because of the level of nutrition in them. Now, they may not have the whole spectrum depending on the kind of seeds you're using, but wow, I cannot say how important it is to have sprouts or greens, dark greens, microgreens on a regular basis. There's no substitute. So there's that. And then the company that was making this kitchen appliance that looked like when you go to the grocery store and you see the ice cream freezer or the frozen food vegetable freezer or the orange juice freezer or whatever. It's a big fridge with a full glass door. That's what these appliances look like. And they're made by LG. And I don't know if we're still able to get them because there's a lot of stuff isn't coming in to the US right now. But that offers you an option for some really fancy microgreens. You can just grow them on the cupboard for that matter, if you want, or in your laundry room, or you're in a back bedroom or whatever. And then a container garden. Wow, if you can get some tubs, they should be deep. It can't be 6 inches. That's not enough root space for anything. It needs to be 12 to 14 inches minimum, and better if it's 2 feet, but that's a lot of dirt. And that's heavy. So, put them where you want them before you fill them. And then, have your compost, fill it with some pebbles in the bottom, pea gravel, in the bottom, maybe 2 inches. And then I put some old straw. You can get, well, I don't know if you're in the city, you probably can't get old straw, but old leaves, old grass clippings, you put those in the bottom over the pebbles, whatever the pea gravel is. And then you fill it with dirt and compost, and you're ready to plant. And you're all set. So you have to have some kind of light, otherwise your plants will be stringy and they won't produce. The more light you can provide, just go to the Tractor Supply, or what's that other one, Farm and Fleet, or the hardware store. I don't know about Lowe's or Menards or one of those. But get a cheap shop light fixture that's just designed to hang from the shop ceiling, and put in a few grow lights and hang that right over the dirt, like 5 inches up, and turn it on. And your stuff will come up in a few days, and you may have to move the light up as plants grow. That's okay. Window glass has too much filtering in it to really allow those plants to get full sun. If you put them on your patio, you don't have to have any lights. So yeah, if you're facing the sun, you're all set. Plants need a minimum, vegetables need a minimum of 8 hours of sunlight per day. Better if it's 12, but 8, if you may have to add light, but you'll get some healthy veggies. You'll be surprised.
Wonderful. What can you say if someone is just beginning on a Get My Body Healthy regimen? What would you say are your 4, 5, or 6 non-negotiables for turning the ship around?
So the first thing is I get 8 to 9 hours of sleep almost every single night. I don't sleep real well or real deeply during the full moon, but otherwise that's an absolute must. You only repair and regenerate when you're in what's called slow wave sleep. And that slow wave comes around, we cycle through all these frequencies, and we enter into slow wave about every 2 hours, hour and a half to 2 hours for 20 minutes. You need at least 4 of those to completely regenerate. So that's first thing. Second thing is start drinking water, 6 to 8 glasses of water every day. So the next thing is regular detox. You have to do some detox. So if you don't do anything else, at least start with coffee enemas to help begin clearing the liver. That is critical. And then consider liver flush, colon sweep, purge, castor oil, olive oil, sweat baths.
I love those. Oh, I love
Aren't they?
Oh,
I know.
They're such a luxury.
I know they are. I agree. Yesterday I did mine, and my daughter calls. She said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in the tub." She said, "It's 2:30 on Tuesday." I said, "Too bad. It's time for my bath, my sweat bath." She's like, "Such a life." So it's part duty. It's part discipline. It's part of the healing routine. You have to do those. And you have to take time away from other things. I had so many other things I needed to do. But the rule for me is take care of yourself first. That's the rule. And that should be everybody's rule. So next thing is I eat only 2 meals a day. They tend to be small. They tend to be mostly raw. I do eat some cooked things, but there's no sugar, caffeine, or soda in my life. Other than the coffee enema, you absorb a little bit of caffeine, but not much. I don't drink coffee. I never did. I don't drink soda. I haven't had a glass of soda pop for, I think, probably 25 or 30 years. And I don't eat sugar. So a lot of, I mean, at Christmas time, I'll have pumpkin pie, you know, that kind of stuff, but not much, not much. And every time I have it, I think, why did I eat that? I don't feel good. So the next thing is exercise daily. I exercise in bits and pieces. We were talking beforehand. I said, I start my exercises before I even get out of bed. I wake up, and after I'm, you know, done arguing with myself, yes, that I have to face the day, then I sit up and I sit cross-legged and I start what I call my eye exercises. And this is just something that I do to generate electricity in the body. And you look up all the way, and then you look to the right all the way, and then you look down all the way and to the left, and you're twisting your whole body from the waist back and forth. You're twisting your whole spine. When you twist that spine, you generate electricity for the brain and the entire body. And that is why I can move like I'm 20 years old instead of 74.
Oh my gosh. And Penny, that is exactly what I notice about you so clearly. And I've been watching you for a few years now. Your cognition is so sharp and clear. I have seen you rattle off how to spell a word that's 19 letters long and no one can pronounce. You are so clear and so springy and so bright. It really is, it's something to see.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I have had people remark, you know, did you just bend over from the waist? And I'm like, well, yeah, how else am I going to reach the floor? So, you know, and they can't bend from the waist, and they can't, you know, bend from the knees either, because their knees are bad or their hips are bad. And all of that I don't have to deal with. And that's from these exercises, these twists that I do. I put my hands on my knees, and I, you know, 1, 2, 3, and I do that 30 times in one direction, 30 times in another direction. And then I put my hands on my knees like this, and I stretch my fingers out. And I do another 30, but this is at an angle and down at an angle and across at an angle and up. And so where the first one is straight up, straight right, straight down, straight left, the second set of 60, 30 in one direction, 30 in the other, is up at an angle, down at an angle, up at an angle, down at an angle. And that's my, you know, my major core electrical generating exercise. And then I do a couple other things to loosen my wrists. You know, I just wiggle my hands, and that keeps your wrist, all these little bones in the wrist, in good shape. And then I do a, you know, a side stretch. I lean all the way over because I sit a lot every day. I'm in front of this screen for hours every day. You have to stretch the small of your back. So all the way over, and 1 and 2, and I do that 24 times to the left and 24 to the right. And then I grab my feet and stretch myself all the way out so that I'm bent right in half. And then I start with my hands still on my feet, holding my feet. I look over my shoulder, and when you do that, it forces you to go like this, like that. Ta-da, ta-da. And I do that. I think that's 32 times, and then that's done with my, I call them my bed exercises. So, and then I get up and start the day, and at some point I get on the treadmill. At another point, I do the Fountain of Youth exercises, which only takes 12 minutes, but the Fountain of Youth exercises regenerate your endocrine system. And that's where you get all your chemistry from.
Are you talking about the Tibetan 5 rights?
Yeah,
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I
They
learned
only
about
take,
those from you. Yeah.
yeah, they only take 15, maybe 12 to 15 minutes. You know, when I'm feeling it's a sloppy day, it's like 10 or 11 minutes. If I really want to do them, you know, very consciously, it's more like 15 minutes. And then I get on the treadmill, you know, sometimes a couple times a day, but always so that it adds up to 2 miles. And that's, you know, that's the motion part of it. If I go out to work outside, I take my water with me because you can't work very long physically without aching at my age without water. And water just ends in aching back in 3 swallows. So, so that's the exercise. And then I take a full spectrum of aminos, minerals, and vitamins. And I take those 3 weeks on, 1 week off, over and over, because it's better if you pulse. The body gets bored, it gets used to stuff. And so it's better if you pulse things. And so, and the other thing is that when you take a lot of vitamins and minerals and aminos, it causes a continuous and really rapid rebuilding in the body. And that, the part of the work of that is tearing down old tissues. That old tissue clogs up the whole system. So then during that week that I'm off, I do one of the detox procedures. So, so once a month, you know, there's some kind of
Oh,
detox that I'm doing.
oh,
Yeah.
that's a very clever way to do it. I like that
Yeah.
idea of one week a month, no
Yep.
vitamins, but then we focus on a detox process.
Right. Yeah. And I actually got that from Gonzalez. He said, give your body a break. Let yourself clean out, do your detox during that week. And I said, oh, yeah. And it works. It works very well.
Wonderful. Great.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Penny, this was so informative, just power
Yeah.
packed with great information. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My
Yeah.
pleasure.
It-
I
I,
really want people to be healthy and feel good.
yeah, and you know, that's the thing. I think we just all want to feel good. And it has been a slow creep over the generations that we
Yeah.
just don't feel good anymore.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's makes me so sad. It's like,
No.
no, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. Well, the more information that we can spread, maybe we can start turning that ship around.
Yeah. Amen. I'm with you.
All right.
So
Well, thank you so much for joining us again. It's always such a treat to talk with you, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
yes, okay.
All right.
There's plenty of stuff to talk about when it comes to health and bodies and stuff like that.
Yeah, great. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.